You ready? Without further ado, the name of this presentation is Professor John Searl and the SEG. Some of our information, our corporate website, searlmagnetics.com, and our information website at searlsolution.com. You can email Fernando Morris at searlmagnetics.com, and my email, verbs@comcast.net. I'd like to thank the Unarius School for allowing us this platform to share this information so that we can deliver some really cool perspectives and get your ideas on that. And so you can ask questions after the presentation, and we can work together on trying to understand what John Searl achieved and the implications of our world in the future. So my name is Jason Verbelli, and I am an independent researcher and experimenter. I like to think for myself, and I've always been interested in things that schools didn't really teach, things that aren't promoted in universities or that you can't find in libraries, stuff that is suppressed, the hidden information. Fernando Morris.
I just want to let everybody know that the Searl technology is something that I've been investigating since 1995, but I became familiar with it in the early 80s. So you can imagine that it's been quite a road for us. And fortunately, over the last 2 or 3 years, we finally got it together to the extent that we're now taking care of business. We set up a corporation so we can proceed and to turn this into a business. Because let's face it, in order to get this technology to the people, you got to work with the economy that currently exists, and that requires time, money, and effort. That's just the way the world works these days. However, Searl Magnetics exists because of the people themselves, members, and those who have interests like Unarius. And fortunately, we cleared up a lot of the misinformation that was really clouding the issue back in the past. In fact, the technology almost got lost. But in 2003, I became personally involved with John Searl, and since then, it's been really a program of getting rid of, clearing out all that misinformation that was just holding back this technology. And it was a process of setting up the websites, getting Professor John Searl engaged in the internet and these websites and posting information. He writes a lot of books, and he still is. Currently, he's writing some chapters and books, which is available to anybody. If you go to the searlaerospace.com and go to the education sections, you'll see his current thoughts on science and technology. He covers a lot of subjects, and there's plenty of information to read there. My role is to interpret all of his, everything that he has said about the technology, interpret it into science and technology. And what I've done is a methodical process of investigating the SEG technology step by step, looking at the merits of the technology, and understand it, and then demonstrate it. And it's been a sequential process, and that's what you'll be seeing here. We're providing the proof of concept of the Searl technology, and we'll show that a little bit later. Go ahead.
And one quote by Professor John Searl is that nothing is impossible except the state of your mind makes it so. And also have to address another quote, that never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. Margaret Mead. Who is Professor John Roy Robert Searl? He was born on May 2nd, 1932, raised in an orphanage, and was poorly treated by his foster family, beaten until he was mostly deaf. Left to think for himself, John wasn't programmed by schools. He had recurring dreams that led him to develop a different understanding of nature, math, energy, and the world at large. There were two dreams which occurred twice a year for 6 years. Dream 1 consisted of hopscotch squares, and Dream 2 consisted of a ring of fire with a calm center. Now, these two dreams led John to write volumes of booklets called The Law of Squares, which delve into everything from physics to medical science to energy, electricity, philosophy, and a whole lot more. This guy wrote volumes and volumes of books that universities should and can be studying now. So as a 14-year-old, John Searl started working for British Rewind Electric Repairs Limited in London, England. This is where he experimented with his ideas from his dreams and proved that there was more to magnets and electricity than what we are commonly taught today. The electric company is where the principles for the SEG and the Searl effect were born. John soon left the electric company and became a chemist's assistant. He was later employed at Shenley Hospital, studying histology and bacteriology. At 16, John won a 6-year grant to study neurosurgery at Cambridge. But his adoptive guardian refused to sign the paperwork which would allow that doctor in the hospital to care for him. He said, no, you're not going to do it. So John Searl's life could have been very different. He could have been a brain surgeon, we don't know. But he ended up studying electrical engineering and had many jobs over the years that correlated with electrical engineering, like electronic fitter at Midland's Electricity Board. He was a prototype wireman for the Royal Air Force, as well as wiring systems for the naval gun control computers used by NATO. Very technical background.
I want to add something here, folks. The Searl Magnetics is set up as a laboratory to investigate the technology. But that's not the way John Searl did it. He worked for Midland Electricity. Now keep in mind that represents massive resources, engineers, power, machinery, everything that he needs. So he happened to be the right person at the right place to do what he did. We're not that fortunate, but at least we're making progress with Searl Magnetics. In other words, he started from the top, we're starting from the bottom up in terms of science and engineering. And so really it's a program of redeveloping what he has done before. We do not have those massive resources, but at least we're progressing and heading the right direction. We are proving out the technology.
Now, what is the Searl effect generator? The SEG is a linear motor operating on a frictionless magnetic bearing. All of the moving parts don't touch each other, like two magnets that want to repel. Similar to how the maglev train floats above the track as it travels, which we will demonstrate with this unit later. It's a motor and a generator. The SEG converts the heat and radiation and surrounding frequencies into usable electricity. The SEG is an open system, much like a windmill. As long as there's wind, it will turn the blades of the fan, and those fan can be connected to a generator which will make electricity.
We should make it clear here that all the energy that we need is here and now. We do not need to smash it, burn it, like we do with conventional technology. We do not have to, it's not necessary to compromise the environment. And that's what the Searl technology does for us. It works with the abundance it's already all around us, and we'll explain a little bit further.
Much like Nikola Tesla said that the energy was all around us, much like Paul Dirac said that there is a sea of energy all around us, and like Walter Russell and many other brilliant minds, which we should be acknowledging and studying rather than sweeping them under the rug and saying it ain't so. So, the SEG harnesses ambient heat in a similar fashion as a windmill. The surrounding heat and radiation is the fuel for the SEG. It does not need to be connected to a battery. Anything above absolute zero is heat and radiation. Therefore, the SEG can convert that heat into usable electricity regardless of its environment. Now, what we see here I have an example, are these segmented rollers. There's 8 stacked on top of each other to make one complete roller. The innermost material is neodymium, which is element 60, unmagnetized, raw, unmagnetized neodymium. This acts as an electron reservoir, as he calls it, and a collector for that energy, similar to how a lake bed collects the natural rain from the environment.
Now you'll notice that the large ring represents really a stator, for those who are familiar with electrical engineering, whereas the rollers represents a rotor. Except that with the SEG you have multiple rollers or rotors, in fact 12 of them. It's a unique design, and based on that information we can work with it as an engineer to develop it. The principles of engineering are inherent in this technology. It just needs to be understood and investigated, which is what we've been doing at SEG Magnetics.
There's 4 materials, the first being neodymium, the innermost. The second layer, that white, is Teflon, which was originally nylon 66, he used in the 40s and 50s. The third layer is the uniquely magnetized ferrite, and these magnets act as an accelerator for the energy. The outermost layer is copper, which collects that energy and then emits it, and it distributes it to standard coils.
Where I found that each layer or each material has a particular function, and when you put them all together, they work as a magnetic component to do what it does. And but then we'll talk about the electrical currents as we move on.
The Searl effect generator has 3 concentric stator rings with 8 segments on each roller. 12 rollers on the first ring, 22 on the second, and 32 on the outermost.
That completes a full prototype. That's what we're all focused on at this time, is to develop the 15 kilowatt version, which happens to be the smallest design that we can make using John's technique. But from there, it is scalable to 50, 500, or a megawatt. So we can see that we can address those needs for, let's say, a resort in an island, or we can scale it down to 15 kilowatts, which you see there, which is suitable for a home. What this means is that you're independent of the grid, and that's nice. You're not subject to brownouts, and you limit all the wiring, ugly wiring that's going around, and it just makes the delivery of power more dependable for everybody. There are also side effects in having one at home. It'll refresh the air. It'll kill viruses and bacteria that happen to be floating around. Dust that happens to be in the air will get charged, and because we're talking about a negative ionization process, and the floor is relatively positive, so it floats down, it gets electrically driven down. So this is great for people who have asthma, and the way John also described it is it becomes very energetic. It's very refreshing. That's the health benefit of having an SEG. I can imagine that would be great for a hospital where you want to sanitize the air, and for the patients, especially those with those who have been burned, because when you're burned, you got to fight the infections and all that. And what the SEG can do is clear the air of the bacteria and allow for a quicker recovery. And John is actually an example of that. He was involved in an explosion, and it shocked the doctors that he recovered so well. I've actually seen a video film of his recovery where half his face was kind of blue. There was evidence of that. Now he has fully recovered from that. You can't tell unless you're a dermatologist. You can see evidence just by looking at the man's face.
So the SEG would be connected within your own home rather than you being connected to the grid. So you're completely independent. Now, what is the Searl effect? The Searl effect is based on a unique form of magnetization where specific waves are imprinted onto a material. The materials are magnetized in a way that is not practiced in today's industry and is not taught in standard electronic engineering schools. When these materials are in motion in relation to each other, the waveform begins to interact and produce electricity while converting the surrounding heat. In addition to producing electricity, the SEG gets very cold and generates a negative charge within its vicinity, as Fernando mentioned earlier. And studies show that negative ions and negative charges can kill bacteria, kill viruses, and promote a healthier environment than what we live in today. The Searl effect also includes the materials spinning without any friction or air drag. There's no friction because of the eddy currents, which prevent the parts from touching, like two magnets that want to repel. If you have copper and you have a magnet in motion next to each other, they want to repel each other. There's no air drag in the SEG prototype because the moving parts are generating such massive electric charges that it's pushing the air away from the device, generating a vacuum around itself, which prevents oxidation of those materials. So the moving parts of the SEG act as if they are in space, floating freely, which again we will demonstrate later with this unit. This is just some visualization so that you can get an idea how the magnets are interacting. Green is a magnet, that green is a magnet. They want to stick to each other. But as this thing rolls around, the faster and faster it goes, the magnet wants to be pushed away from the copper. So a tiny gap results in between the stator and the roller, and nothing touches. Those magnetic waves are acting like magnetic gears, keeping everything in sync, and they spin as they orbit the stator. This is the main difference between John Searl's magnets and all other known magnets, is that everybody knows magnets to have a north and a south, top and bottom, positive, negative. John Searl figured out a way to magnetize a material to put waves and complex poles onto a magnet. So in addition to there just being a north and a south, there are waves of poles imprinted onto the material, which results in very different behaviors and beneficial effects.
I should add at this point that that was one of my first tasks, because I have an electrical background, is to try to prove or demonstrate this phenomena or this effect that you can develop waveforms on magnetic material. Because as we all know, magnets are just north and south. You know, simple enough. That's what the industry does. But what he was describing is waveforms on top of it. And that was hard to understand because you can't find that in any books or any references that I know of. So I had to start from scratch. I had to build my own magnetizer. Not the flash discharge that the industry uses these days, but something that uses the correct amount of forces. And gradually I started detecting evidence of it. And it took me a while, but eventually I was able to demonstrate without a doubt that yes, you can impress waveforms on magnetic or magnets. And this is what this unit is all about. In fact, this platform I built from scratch so we can scan and detect that waveform, which is evident right here. So we got a Gauss meter. Here's the sensor. The analog output goes to the oscilloscope. And we can now demonstrate and show this waveform.
Is it being driven?
We're turning the ring sample so that we can detect that waveform.
Which I'll elaborate on later on.
Physically, it's being rotated, yes. So we can scan exactly what's happening on the surface of that magnet.
If that was a regular magnet, we would see a flat line.
As far as we know, Searl Magnetics is the only company who is researching this process or is able to do it.
So the point is that there are different ways of making magnets that are not taught, which result in very different behaviors of those magnets. And there are people and companies out there who are experimenting with multipolar magnets and coated magnets and all these really new types of sciences that have not been tapped into, studied, and it's a really revolutionary area of study.
Would a segmented magnet accomplish the same thing?
Yes. So you have to have these segmented magnets in this particular model. So there are major differences between Searl's technology and all conventional technology, regular motors and generators that we use today. Here are some of the differences. Contrast between uniform, coherent, or ordered technologies and more random or chaotic technologies. SEG is uniform and coherent, whereas conventional is random and chaotic. When you draw power from the SEG, or with a load, it speeds up, and the magnets start to spin faster. In a conventional generator, when you draw power from it, they want to slow down. With the SEG, the more power you draw, the colder it gets, because it's having to convert more heat to generate more power. In a conventional generator, the more energy that you draw from it, the more that they want to heat up and break. The SEG is frictionless and noiseless. No wear, no tear, no sound. None of the parts touch, nothing to make any noise. In a conventional generator, you usually have a crankshaft or a bearing or parts touching, chains, and you're going to have heat, friction, and noise.
Yeah, those are the mechanical problems that have been solved with this SEG design. Yes, it looks very simple, but it's actually very sophisticated electromagnetically. And to build it requires extremely high precision, which makes it difficult to build. But we are succeeding. But I also want to make everybody aware, when he says coherent technology, it's not just because of the physical, frictionless attributes of it, but rather at the quantum level. It is ordered, it is orderly and not chaotic. If you had a microscope that could look down there, you'll see there's a lot happening. There's a lot of vibration and electrons all moving in chaos, which ultimately manifests as temperature or heat. Whereas the SEG operates in a coherent, or makes that environment coherent. In other words, not random, but uniform. And that translates into electrical currents, coherent currents. And when you have that kind of, those type of currents, you don't have the bumping of electrons into atoms creating heat. Rather, they're able to pass through almost like a tunneling effect. And that's what helps drive the rollers, or power the rollers, and it gives you the mechanical motion. So we do have a pretty good idea of the theory of operation, and that's what guides our program.
So the SEG takes heat and converts it to electricity. Normal technologies have to have a battery, a supply from a closed system, and then it feeds a light bulb or whatever device we use from a battery. But in the case of the SEG, the surrounding heat and environment is the battery. Just like the wind is the battery for a windmill. As long as there's wind turning that thing, it's going to generate power.
Now, this doesn't mean that the SEG operates on heat. It simply it describes the energy content of the environment. It's, I would say, mostly thermal range. Our body emits it. You know, it's everywhere. But really, anything outside of the, above the thermal band or infrared band and below it, the SEG is effectively converting or absorbing all those energies into its own operating frequency. Which sounds astounding, but really nature does it all the time. Atoms and electrons absorb photons, which are little electromagnetic packets, and converts it to whatever its environment allows it to be. It's just that the SEG harnesses it, all that, and makes it, and operates in its own frequency.
While it does so, it eliminates pollution, it eliminates the environment that pollution flourishes in, and creates that negative charge. Whereas the conventional technologies promote the heat, which then bacteria start to grow and just leads to all this nastiness that we live in today.
Yeah, I would say that because of our conventional technology, which is so flawed, it has promoted viruses and bacteria, and they've been having a field day. But with this technology, it'll reverse that trend. So that's good news for us, and not so good for viruses and bacteria. But I think it's time we enjoy our environment rather than all these other problems that we've been generating with conventional technologies.
The following slides are images of Professor John Searl's more controversial achievements. And what we see here is him building this disc, which he called the Demo 1, and ended up flying this around, remote controlling, and successfully was demonstrating this in front of many, many people.
Well, I'd like to make it clear right now that Searl Magnetics is focused on the SEG for energy as a generator, and that's enough. But there is a side effect. If, as you draw power from it, and energy has to come from somewhere, the temperature drops because it works with the laws of thermodynamics. And so, as energy is being converted, mostly thermal, it translates into electrical currents. So as current goes up, temperature goes down. All right. What we have here is a generator concept that has been developed by John Searl already. So now it's up to us to work with it, work with him. He's only, he's an 82-year-old man, he can't do it alone. So we're trying to create an organization or a company that can support and develop this technology. But what I'm trying to say is that there are two areas that this technology covers. That's the Searl technology as a generator, and then there's a side effect which affects gravity. And when John first developed his first prototypes, they wouldn't stay on the table. Okay, they would energize, rev up, and end up on the ceiling. It wouldn't stay down. That was his initial problem because all he was trying to do is create a generator, but this thing wouldn't stay down. It wasn't until he put in the dielectric layer that he was able to control it. So that's what he did after that. He said to himself, well, if this thing doesn't want to stay down, we'll build a structure around it to control it. So you still have an SEG in there around the perimeter, but now you have a structure that allows it to take in energy from the center, electrical, and emit it through the sharp edges on the periphery. So what you have is a framework that allows the SEG to, as an open system, to emit and absorb energy from the center. And the media that it uses for harnessing energy is the electron itself, because the electron has the ability to absorb and emit energy, typically in the form of photons. So think of the SEG as an open system, just like a dam. It has its own reservoir of energy, and it emits it to the environment, just like a dam. It emits its discharge into the environment. But nature has a way of recycling, and it ends up back in the reservoir. It's the same principle with the SEG. It's an open system. It emits the electrical charges. Their energy is diminished, but once they're introduced back to the environment, they get charged up. But there's an energy cycle. They get attracted back to the center. So there's a energy cycle that's at work with the SEG. That explains where the energy is coming from. That's coming from outside, not just from within itself.
Would it be over unity?
No, it's not over unity because you can measure the energy going into it and coming out. It is really an energy converter. That's all. It's converting energy that's already around us.
As much energy as you are drawing is as much energy as it is converting.
So, go ahead.
So would that be characterized as a toroidal effect then?
Absolutely.
Yes. Now, here's an article showing John Searl flying his devices around, and the title says, Mr. Searl expected to offer day trips to the moon. Now, he originally had plans to build a manned craft, but never received the appropriate funding to do so. So his dreams can still become a reality if we are to get the the funding necessary. But the first and foremost aspect of this technology is the energy generation part. The flying aspect of it would come later. First, we need to address our energy needs in this world before we can go out and explore.
We have set up Searl Aerospace. It's not an active company yet, but there is a website there. It's still it's still under construction. But right now, the active company is Searl by Next. As you can see, searlbynext.com. And there we have, here in this county, we have a laboratory and a machine shop, and we have there's 3 full-time employees working there. So we're working as quickly as our budget allows us. The good news is we're having our best year yet in terms of progress and the organization.
Now, the SEG can not only provide clean, sustainable power, but can also be used to revolutionize the transportation industry. John Searl found that the more power he drew from his device, the colder it got until it overloaded. If you try to draw more energy than what a normal generator can provide, it's going to heat up and break. When John attempted to draw more power than what the SEG could provide, it got so cold, flooded with so much energy, that it became superconductive, developed its own magnetic or electric field, and actually flew away, never to be seen again.
And really, that's what distinguishes the generator from this technology, is that we never allow the SEG to go superconductive because it manifests this other effect. So if you want to keep that as a generator, we have to limit the currents. Now, so if it's a 15 kilowatt generator, we have conventional circuitry that'll limit the currents so that you can keep your generator. Put it that way.
More articles written about John Searl and his flying disc projects. Now, because Professor John Searl had the necessary funding to support his research, he was able to develop this technology. And it was years worth of experimenting that he learned how to control the device which wanted to fly away. So he said, if it wants to fly, let it fly. And we just build a body around it and learn how to control it. So John used ham radio to remotely control what he called a levity disc. John Searl prefers the term inverse gravity as opposed to anti-gravity. You're not canceling or negating gravity, but you are inversing its function. So whereas we are being pushed to the Earth currently, the Earth then pushes us away. So John was given Professor John Searl was given the honorary title of professor in Germany in the late 1960s, when he was giving all of these lectures and teaching these scientists that were attending his lectures. He impressed them so much, and they learned so much from him, they voted to give him some sort of a standard or title that would acknowledge his understanding, that it was on par with their own. So first they voted, hey, should we call him Dr. Searl? People said, no, that doesn't really qualify as a doctor. So they voted again, so let's call him Professor Searl. Okay, so he was given that honorary title. The U.S. Air Force even sent letters requesting that John Searl send his work to their Propulsion and Energy Research Department. Here's a letter from a George Eulig from the U.S. Air Force detailing that they are interested in what he called a disc-shaped type of flying craft, and at no charge to the government. If he could send all of the information to them, they'd really appreciate that. John successfully flew his inverse gravity vehicle, or IGV, in front of many witnesses, including the BBC News. The BBC ran weekly pieces on John Searl's work in progress for almost a year. These television broadcasts showed the levity disc in flight and gave updates on the work being done to build a large craft. Again, unfortunately, John Searl never received the funding necessary to pursue that very expensive venture. These are articles and pictures in the Sunday Mirror and the Hans and Berks Gazette. Pictures were taken by John Hocknell, press write-up by Phil Sanders. The point is that there is documentation for this, and many people saw him do this, and he demonstrated this. But if we want to see this again today, we have to provide him with equal resources to what he originally had when he first developed this. Because this is not something that you can build in your garage. This is not a do-it-yourself project. And John Searl was not alone when he first built this thing. He had factories, an electric company he worked for, all the materials provided to him, teams of people, and infrastructure, the environment, everything he needed, which represents a multi-million-dollar infrastructure. Now, Professor John Searl was able to develop the SEG, again, because he worked at the electric company. When he left the electric company, all of that funding and resources ceased, so he was on his own, until he met a rich man named George Haynes, who believed in him, listened to him, and funded him with a couple $1 million to get his work up and running again, so that he can pick up where he left off at the electric company. When George died of cancer, again, his funding ceased, and he was forced to walk away from all the electric equipment and everything that he developed again. Years later, a group of men who heard about John's claims and his work and heard he was flying these things around, decided that they wanted to give him a chance. They wanted to fund him. But they would only give him the money and resources under the stipulation that he not try to go commercial. They just wanted to research, develop, and experiment and see if indeed it was true. And again, he started to develop this company from scratch, from ground zero, with a couple $1 million worth of infrastructure. Today, people who hear about the SEG, they want to use it in their home. They hear about these fantastic claims that we could be doing this and that, and they just want us to just build it. It's a little more difficult than just doing it. You have to have the proper resources. So, what happened to Professor John Searl's work? Most of John Searl's original work was destroyed by fire while he was out of town for a few days. All of his belongings were gathered up on the front yard and burned with the aid of police supervision. The home where John conducted, where he lived when he conducted these original experiments has since been bulldozed and demolished. It took years for him to acquire enough support and try to pick up where he left off, time and time again. In 2003, John had poison put in his drink by people who said they wanted to invest. And in 2005, all the equipment you see here and more that you don't see in this picture was stolen from his home. Gone. And that's when Fernando Morris really started to get involved with John Searl, trying to help him back on his feet and help this guy, because he saw that there's some major stuff going on. The implications of this technology are so far-reaching, but who's going to give this guy a chance when he keeps getting ripped off? How are you going to develop the technology if you don't have the resources, and when you try to acquire it, it gets taken away time and time again? So the paradox is that people say to John, once you rebuild your technology as you did before, then I'll fund you. That's like telling a chef, bake your cake first, and then I'll give you the ingredients. You can't until you have equal to what you did to build it before. So in order to rebuild a working SEG, John needs funding, resources, and an infrastructure equal to what he had at the electric company. So he started from the top, but today we have to work from the ground up and acquire everything again. And that's what we have done, is to help facilitate this information and getting to people who've done their homework. And the investors who have done their homework have made it possible to acquire our research and development facility here in Southern California, and to also get some of the industrial equipment needed to press these magnets together and imprint these waves. Because it takes a lot of electronic equipment and some serious hardware.
Yeah, our effort is really not like the way John did it in the past. We're not working within a factory environment that had exactly what he needed, but we are focused in terms of a laboratory environment. like I said before, we're looking for the proof of concept, we're trying to understand it, and we're proving it out. And that's what we're going to demonstrate over here. We're going to show you the merits of the technology.
So Fernando Morris is the lead engineer, and he has the task of isolating all of these claims of the SEG one by one and step by step in a realistic way in a professional environment. Not just trying to waste materials and money and time and effort to see if we can throw something together to make a big paperweight. This technology requires a lot of precision, and that's what these investors have allowed us to do, is they realize the significance and what it takes to get this done. And thank God they have provided us with what we need so far. We still need help, but
My
we're
credit
getting
goes
there.
to the individual investors. It's really the public that's been supporting us, not major, venture capitalists, because they seem to be short-sighted and they want to make a profit real quick. They need to understand this is R&D. We're redeveloping a technology that it's not conventional. So, we can't do this quickly on a precise timetable because it's exploratory, it's experimental, it's redeveloping a process that is very unusual. But, it's all worth it because we're talking about a technology here that can help support a civilization, because we all need power. Short of that, people die. You see that prices are going up. That's inconvenient for us, but for third world countries, it translates into poverty and death. And if you look at the chart of energy versus population, there's a direct correlation. The more energy is, it corresponds to the population. If energy goes down, population is going to go down. So we have a choice. We can cut down on the population, or we can develop clean alternative technologies. So this is, in effect, a humanitarian project, and hopefully it will succeed.
Now we're going to go over some of the physical demonstrations that we have. We've offered a bit of history about the man, Professor John Searl, and gave a glimpse into the magnitude of his achievements. So we're here to demonstrate some of those validated claims that Fernando has been able to isolate and prove. So what you see here, and what people who are on the internet, and they've seen the YouTube videos of this thing spinning around, this is the SEG Mock Up, not the prototype. And there are major differences to distinguish between what we have here and what we are trying to achieve. And I encourage people to read this document that I put together and uploaded on the internet so people can help to distinguish between the difference. And it's called SEG Mock Up versus SEG Prototype, Stages of R&D. So in addition to this presentation, if people would like to go onto the net and see that paper and the PDF of this slideshow, I would highly encourage people to do that so they have more context to understand. So what we have here is the SEG Mock Up. The Mock Up, the charges are coming from the coils, which are located on the outer rim, and through induction, they are going from the coils to the core. So there is a gap between this stator ring and the coil. These little magnets are in between there. So as the charge goes through that gap, it makes the magnet spin. This is not producing power. This is not free energy right here. This is not converting heat to electricity. There are regular magnets in this setup. So people have to address that. They have to realize that, because people on the internet, they have misconceptions about what they're looking at. So we're trying to clear
What we
that.
have here is demonstration or proof of concept, and a way to evaluate and demonstrate that the SEG does have a rotor and stator relationship, and the magnetic orientations are also correct if you're an engineer. The magnetic orientation is along the axis. You see the rotation and is 90 degrees to that. Therefore, the electric field are radial, which is the way John Searl has always described it. That is encouraging, that's proof of concept, and we can learn from that and move on. And we can also demonstrate it. It's fine to talk about it, it's great to show it. And that's what you're seeing here. What the SEG does is have the rotors rotating in a unique design. And it is correct in terms of engineering. It does have a motor and generator principle. It just looks different. It's an out-of-box design. But I went further than that. He also described that these rollers does not touch the surface. And you can hear that it does right now, because it's just a demonstration unit. So my next task was to isolate and prove that this description that the rollers don't touch does exist in this design. And we'll demonstrate that a little bit later. Go ahead and finish up.
The mock-up is a demonstration tool to show that indeed the rollers will spin and orbit the stator as an electric charge goes through that gap. In this mock-up, the charge is coming from a standard battery through the coils. In the prototype, the charge is coming from the surrounding environment and is going to the coils. Mock-up being fed power, prototype feeds power. Mock-up has regular magnets, prototype has the specially magnetized materials. Let's see, another function of the mock-up is to show basic magnetic interactions that the parts don't want to touch and that they will remain equidistant to each other.
What you see right now is one of those attributes, ingredients in design, is that not only are the rollers on track, but they're also equally spaced themselves. So you see this multi-functions working together in this design. And that's what I keep discovering the more I research it. Unique effects working together.
Now in this setup we have a stationary stator, and these rollers are orbiting the stationary stator. But in order to show the levitation effect of those rollers, we isolate this. So what we do is we have a spinning stator and stationary roller. So in the mock-up right there we have the stationary stator, moving roller, moving stator, stationary roller. So the faster that the copper spins, imagine if this was a roller, none of those, it can't touch.
So this proves what Professor Searl always said, even before I understood it, is that these rollers will float and on the surface of the copper. It's called a magnetic bearing. That's fantastic for any generator. Imagine a motor under your hood. It doesn't need oil. No wear. That explains why he says it'll last a lifetime, to say the least. So the SEG would be a one-time purchase, and you can pass it on to your kids. Isn't that fantastic?
Yeah.
And what I'd like is for a couple people in the audience to come up and to feel the repulsion effect of the magnets in relation to the spinning stator.
Can we turn up the lights so that our people on the internet can see?
Sure, please. If someone would like to come up.
My next task was to demonstrate why would the roller spin when they're not touching anything? And it had to do with the magnetization process. There are waveforms. And what we find is that it will cause the rollers to spin. So we're proving John Searl's claim with science and technology and the principles that we already understand as an engineer. It's just that we have to understand it's a composite of many innovations. And we have to understand what's going on with this design. And what he's doing right now is placing a roller next to the rotating stator, and it's actually spinning. I'd like as many as people as possible to feel and see them. So if you'd like to get line up in a row here, you have a chance to see and feel for yourself what a magnetic bearing is all about with the Searl effect generator.
Of course, the more, the harder you didn't push it there, the more the bulb would light up. Sure.
Shit is no straight.
Yep, no strings attached.
What people are witnessing here and feeling is proof of concept about the Searl technology.
Creating a gap. So as they're spinning, they're generating current, but not pushing it.
That is very cool.
Just hold this up to that.
Can you kind of step to the side
So
so
this-
the internet can see?
This is
Like
not
step
to your
touching,
right,
these are not
Tracy.
touching
Tracy,
this.
can you move to your right? so
Where
the
is it
internet
touching
can
against
see
the stator?
As you do it, yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna turn it.
Okay,
down.
so the touching is at the stator.
Yeah, touching is this magnet.
I'm willing to take some questions right
These are
now, while
rolling.
others
These are
are
rolling as they orbit around.
in line. Does anybody have questions?
And
Are there other companies researching this like you?
No,
after
only
they
Searl
reach a certain
Magnetics is the only
RPM,
organization
the
that's fully
copper will push the
investigated.
magnet away, as we see in this setup. Hold that up there.
Now,
Closer.
Professor John Searl is the president of our organization. So I want to make that clear, is that we have structured the company so it can move ahead. So John Searl is the president. We also have a company called Searl Technology Incorporated, based in Florida. They take care of all of the legal considerations, so it's able to issue shares just like any other company. We are a corporation.
Move to the right, please.
You're in the way of
Who's
the.
the other?
Can you move to your right, please?
There.
There we go. Thank you.
So this is a stock? Or
Absolutely, yes.
Stock,
Um,
by stock and all that.
Absolutely, yes. In fact, we have licenses in Australia. We're working on Canada at this time. We have some special arrangements for certain states in the U.S. Again, that's licensing. We are a for-profit company. We intend to reward our investors,
How many
especially
shares outstanding?
This one is just sitting.
the memorandum we're issuing is for 600,000 at this time, but we're expanding on that.
Is it the IC?
All will have to be at an angle.
It's not public yet, it's still a private
You
organization.
just see this one. The north and south.
Anybody that makes an inquiry, you can give them more detailed information.
It has to be at an angle in order to get that.
What was that?
I think everybody's aware now that energy is a big problem, and something needs to change, and that makes it a better situation for clean alternative technology like ours to actually get to the marketplace.
Question, how do you pull power from it?
That's what the electromagnets are for. They're to pick up, well, like he was, like they were saying with Tesla, induction. As the rollers pass by, the magnetic field induces energies into electromagnets, and that's how you tap energy out of the SEG.
So the semicircular coils on the outside are actually taps, power taps?
Yeah, they're the taps. You let the SEG do what it does.
That's
but
not what's driving it?
That's what's driving it in the mock-up. But in the prototype, classically, they're there to pick up.
And the heat effect instead spins it.
The heat effect is the heat is being converted into electrical power. It's a different way of working. The electrical current of the SEG is different. It's not your typical electrical current like we see here. It's a pairing of two electrons that forms a Cooper pair, or what's called a boson. Go ahead.
Can you repeat his question because it won't pick up?
There was too much noise. I'm sorry.
No, if he's not going to go up to the mic.
Say it again.
Oh, I just wondered, maybe you could repeat the question. There seem to be three rings in the actual
Yeah.
Y3 or Y04.
You could make it 4, but John has found that 3 is the optimum. You can build 5, but then it doesn't become cost effective. it's through experimentation that he has found that 3 sets of rings or rollers will give you the optimum energy output for the time and money it took to build the first 3, the set of rings and rollers.
How do the rings interrelate?
Well, the first ring, the innermost, can we show a depiction of the SEG with the 3 rings somewhere in this slide? The innermost set of rings or roller feeds the second, and the second feeds the third. So it's a series additive power. And then you got the electromagnets that pick up the energy by induction.
Need to get my clicker. Could you go to the next slide until I relocate that click? Yeah, that's good.
All right, I'm ready for another question.
How's the current directed in the copper ring? If there's a, is there a,
The current is directed by the general magnetic field because the magnetic is axis, along the axis. Then you got rotation, not increase to that. So,
there's no poles? I mean, it's not.
and if you know about electromagnetics, the electric field has to be radial, and that's what guides the currents from the inside out. Yeah, and like I said, the electrical currents are not conventional. It's a pairing of electrons. They behave like photons. So think of this as photonic electricity. It's able to bridge gaps, and eventually they end up back in the atmosphere, which develops a little bit of a halo to it. And the currents forms this toroidal waveform. Go ahead.
Did the 3 different layerings of loops, did they synchronize together in the same revolution field, or were they at different relative speeds between the 3 different rings?
I know that John Searl described it as the second, you can correct me, the second set of rings and rollers spin 2.5 times faster, and then the third set even faster than that. Go ahead.
Is this typical of the speed of his?
No, not at all.
This went very
What we
fast.
expect at an idle mode is for a prototype to operate at 2,000 RPMs. And when you draw power from it, and I know it will speed up, it has to because the currents go through the rollers. That's what causes the rollers to move. That's understood now. It will speed up. In other words, it'll instantly give you the power that you request from it. It just responds.
But at the same time, the surrounding environment will cool down to compensate for the energy that you have just drawn.
That's why we say it doesn't violate the law of thermodynamics. It just needs to be understood. Go ahead.
What are the upper ranges that you've seen so far since you've encountered his work?
The upper ranges in terms of
Of the
what?
revolution
With
velocities?
the mock-up, about 200 RPMs. Beyond that, it starts to develop this magnetic bearing effect and becomes somewhat unstable. So we isolate the effect with this other demonstration unit there, just to prove it and better understand it. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's another group of scientists who explain neodymium as having a little finger into zero-point energy. And I'm wondering if that kind of explains it. You are cooling down, you feel the cooling effect, but also some of the energy could be coming from the inside of the atoms, you know what I mean?
Well, the way I understand it, the SEG utilizes the electron itself, and it has good old-fashioned energy that we can harness. We're not doing that these days. All we're doing is shoving the electrons in copper wires to make currents. But they're still operating in a random mode. There's a lot of chaos going on. You're just pushing it back and forth to keep alternating current. Whereas the SEG operates in a different mode. It pairs the electrons, it makes it coherent, and the consequence is you're not bumping into the atomic lattice and creating heating. And so you got focused electrical currents, and associated with it are the magnetic fields. It's just that the Cooper pairs disguise themselves and behave like photons. And so it's a different type of technology. That's why I call it a coherent technology. We're used to conventional technology operates in the random domain, you might say.
And can we go to the next slide? We have a couple more left.
Go ahead.
Now, this is still a possible future. We are working hard every day to rebuild this infrastructure necessary to put together a working prototype, as Professor John Searl originally did. It takes time, money, and effort to bring something this involved to fruition. Even though Professor John Searl proved his claims to many people over the years, and himself, he never received the needed funding to turn his dreams into a commercial reality. This is where we come in today. So the guarantee that John Searl gives for his technology is that it will have no noise, no pollution, no heat, no vibration, no consumption of Earth's oxygen, no need to carry fuel, no runways needed to take planes off, and no launching pads, since this can ascend and descend. Tomorrow's transportation is today. Research and development of Searl technology. So in 1968, this was John Searl's dream to try to bring this, revolutionize the transportation industry. And we need people's help in order to get the SEG rebuilt as it was before and bring this to the public. But John Searl, the future is here and now. The man who saved tomorrow. Nasty, polluted world versus beautiful, clean reality that we could be living. And the sooner that we start giving John Searl the resources and other people like him the funding and attention that they deserve and that they've earned, then we can start to utilize this stuff and live it rather than just talk about it. We'll turn the page, the future is now. And this is a little image of what John Searl would like to see in the future. Now there is a DVD that was made by Bradley Lockerman, and you can visit johnsearlstory.com for information about the DVD, which details Professor John Searl's life and goes over some of the history.
Actually, tonight, if they want to put in orders, we are in process of working with the manufacturer producer of that DVD, so we'll be able to get that for you here.
So I've been involved with the what's known as the UFO field for a long time, and I've heard sort of similar stories, not particularly of this type of story, but almost invariably at some time, perhaps in this fellow's childhood, he had some form of a contact with higher intelligences. Has he ever mentioned anything to you, Fernando, about what happened to him in his childhood?
No, he doesn't dwell on that subject either. It's just he developed that shape because it has an electronic shape. The sharp edges allows the electrons.
But he had no formal training when he came into the science.
And that's why we have this technology, because he was not brainwashed with conventional education.
Translated it all from his dreams, from two dreams.
Yeah, what are dreams, right? So.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, he felt they must have meant something because they were pretty orderly.
Yeah.
And it guided, his search for this technology. But it all started pretty simply as, I think his question was, what is the power of 2 over 2? And somebody drew a square for him. Well, it looked like an empty box to him, so that he felt there had to be something in there, and it all manifested after all that into a matrix that, as it turns out, describes energy in time and space. And what he saw in that, and it does explain nature's processes. He saw that we live in chaos. And he saw that energy, by transposing those figures, you can have an output that is not random. And that's what we try to do, or explain with one of these squares is that if you add all these numbers up, you get a random numbers of outputs. What John has found is that this matrix does represent nature's processes, especially the quantum level. So what he did is he transposed those figures so that the output is always, you can't see it, but it's always 34 here.
Fernando, the microphone, please.
Microphone.
So what he said is that there are 16 squares on that Rubik's Cube. If you are to put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the numbers in order, if you add up each row, the sum will be different. But John Searl figured out a way to arrange those numbers in a random order, and no matter which way that you add those numbers, they'll all equal the same sum. And this is what he describes is the difference between conventional technology and his understanding is that conventional technology is as if you have all of those numbers in order as we know, but it's coming out to be different sums, chaos. He accounts for the randomness, but the output is all the same.
And
It's
what
very
that
difficult to describe without the diagrams and the context.
what that translates to for us in terms of physics is it creates resonance and coherent electrical flow, rather than electrons in a random mode, which is manifest temperature. And so that makes it useful. That's why we call it a coherent technology.
I have a question. Then the coils, if they were intended as pickups
Yeah.
to tap energy off of it, would they all still be wired in parallel?
It could be wired
Or
in parallel or in series. It depends on your output, what kind of output you want out of it.
So
They're all in parallel right now, is that correct?
Yes, they are. Right now.
12 phase.
Oh. Yeah, okay,
So these are some of the websites that you can visit to get more information and context for John Searl's technology, his history, the newsletters that he's put out, the booklets that he's written, all sorts of info. And you can find me at facebook.com/Verbelli, and I have a bunch of pictures. I have hundreds of videos uploaded on YouTube of John Searl's lectures and radio shows and demonstrations of the mock-up and related suppressed material. And I wanted to just leave on this one note, that we get what we pay for, and we pay for what we want. As of now, the people of the world pay for gas, oil, nukes, war, and bailouts. If they're too big to fail, then we must be too small to succeed in their eyes. It's been so difficult to get these ideas and technologies to fruition because of lack of context to understand how they're possible, and legal avenues have been blocked which prevent the funding of these technologies. So I encourage people to visit northpointcharity.org, which was helped set up by Sterling Allen of PESN.com. And this is a 501c3 nonprofit, which is fully compliant with SEC and IRS laws, so you can write it off on your taxes and donate and help to the cause. Now, major corporations have to donate to charities at the end of a quarterly earning or after the tax year, so why not just add this onto their list of charities that they already have? It's mandatory they donate, so at the end of the year, why not just add this to their list and have it be funded? Which, ironically, the people who are ignoring this would help to fund this. We can use this technology in the future to help eliminate the radiation from Japan, to clean up the world, to promote a healthy environment and long-lasting technology for our kids, grandkids, and who knows how many generations down the road. So again, I'd like to thank the people in the audience, the Unarius group, and all of the people watching on the internet and a live web stream for giving us time and considering us and allowing for the platform to speak. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.